Hello and welcome to the maiden edition of the Agenda 2063 series on African Continental Free Trade Area. We're happy to be here in a discussion on the Continental Free Trade Area and why it's so important. Very quickly after I'm done, we're going to quickly go into the segment which looks at the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, why it's important in the context of Agenda 2063. When I return, we'll have a quick discussion with an introduction of our guests who will help us understand why today's maiden show is so important.
Are you an institution or individual? Do you intend to organize a memorable event to be archived for future reference? Then look no further than AAU Studios, because it's your best bet with our spacious studio and state-of-the-art media equipment such as 4K Panasonic video cameras, KinoFlow lights, assorted microphones, live streaming equipment, among others. You are sure to get the best of productions. Visit us at Trinity Avenue, East Legon, adjacent the National Accreditation Board, or contact the AAU Studios via the following email addresses: info@aau.org, AAUTV@aau.org, or ransford@aau.org. Alternatively, you can call us on +233 244 736280.
All right, so welcome back from the break. Thank you for, once again, this association with the AAU TV, who are also on Facebook and YouTube. The whole idea right now with the Africa Peer Review Mechanism is that the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, as per a retreat in Addis Ababa in November 2018, it was decided by the Council of Ministers that the Africa Peer Review's mandate would be expanded to look more closely at African governance. So to that end, the mandate of the African Peer Review Mechanism was expanded. You will or may not know that the Africa Peer Review Mechanism started as far back as 2003, but it started 2003, and Ghana was one of the pioneers of the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. Why it's so important now when in the discussion of Agenda 2063 is because as in the year in which we are discussing silencing of the guns, which is the theme of the African Union right now, governance comes under question, and the African Peer Review Mechanism looms large, because right now, as per the Peace and Security Council resolution, recent one, 899th communique, it was stated quite clearly that member states should be encouraged to start encouraging themselves, peer review otherwise, to push forward the whole theme of African governance, including making sure that African member states accede to the peer review. Right now, we have around 38 member states that have acceded to the peer review mechanism. There are 55 member states of the AU, so there's still quite some work to do, so that by 2023, which is the hashtag for the Africa Peer Review Mechanism at the moment, there will be at least all the AU member states would have acceded to the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. For us, and for the conversation on Agenda 2063 is so important, because the history will tell us that the Africa Peer Review Mechanism predicted the violence in Kenya in 2008. It also predicted the xenophobia that we have seen in South Africa. To that end, it's a very important conflict resolution tool. In Kenya at the moment, they are looking at counties, so and how they can adopt it at the local level. We understand that an Africa Peer Review Mechanism team will be coming to Accra soon to have a second review of how parameters on governance are like. And so these are some of the things that we want to talk about in this segment of APRM Watch, so that people get a sense of why APRM is important and will continue to be an important element in the whole conversation on Africa's governance going forward. So that quickly rounds up the APRM Watch. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll return to the studio to our guests right here.
Kampala International University, you are the torch that lights above. In you we see a future bright, and by you the nation gaineth from services pure. The emblem that you trust is the message, unique in place and truly the giants.
So welcome back from the break. I'm very happy to have my two guests in the studio. To my right, I have Louis Yao Afo, who is the Executive Director of the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCTA Policy Network, Ghana and Diaspora. And then I also have to his right, Reverend Dr. Samuel Mensah, who is a staffer at Wisconsin University. He's a very big man. And he's also a director at the AfCTA Policy Network. So gentlemen, welcome to the studios of Association of African University TV. Happy to have you here to have this very important discussion on the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the kind of questions really people want to know and want to start off with is why the Continental Free Trade Area, why the hosted in Ghana? What's so special about Ghana that it needs to be hosted right here? And then maybe you could segue that into helping us understand why your network was formed, because some little birdies have told me that in August 2019, the network was celebrated at an audience of Ministry of Trade and all these at the 3-day conference. And so help us to understand why it's become this apparently fastest growing network around the Continental Free Trade Area. So we're going to start off with you, Mr. Louis Yao Afo. Thank you for making time out of your busy schedule to speak with us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here, and good morning to my colleague. Okay. Basically, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, it is the right time it should come, because Africa has been looking for an economic integration for a very long time, and over the years there have been various regional blocks of integration, but Continental Free Trade Agreement sums it up all. It's not doing away with the existing trade agreements. It is rather coming to become an umbrella of all of them, whereby you have 54 member states coming together to trade. The importance of it is that at the end of the day, you're going to have a bigger economy. Unfortunately, though, we are still going to be closer to India, because then we're going to have the second largest free trade area after the World Trade Organization. And so that is key. And it's also significant because at the end of the day, it's going to boost a lot of exports, boost an intra-African trade, so that a lot of companies that were not able to do certain capacity of exports to the European market, to the American market, can now conserve within African markets. And you can have all the spiritual implications that will come because of such kind of agreement. For our network, it was formed because at the end of it, some of us were doing some consultancy for the African Union on the Continental Free Trade, and we realized that there's a need to put all stakeholders together. And so the network was formed to put together most of our professionals, with about 220 professionals globally who are on the network, and we use a different management system whereby people can contribute their expertise virtually, so virtual faces, virtual professional expertise, to implement a Continental Free Trade by becoming a kind of an agency to governments and to institutions, private sector, and the public at large. And so we were recommended last year, August, as you mentioned, by the Chief Technical Advisor, or the head of the CFTA at that time, for championing the cause of Continental Free Trade on the globe, or on African continent.
Fantastic. Let's stick still with education. Reverend Emmanuel Mensah, you teach at Wisconsin University, and I understand they do courses on international affairs and so on at the master's level and these kind of things. Maybe you can tell us, are the students familiar with this whole Continental Free Trade Area? And have they started, do they even know that it's coming to Ghana? And why, and if they don't, what is it that you think needs to quickly be done so that, some of your students can start appreciating the fact that, a huge organization under the AU is coming to town?
Thank you very much. And I think by and large, you realize that Africa have seen some form of political independence for some time, and over the past decades, we've been struggling to gain an economic independence, and that is the only way that African countries can develop and be able to develop our potentials. So there is a need for us to do social orientations to be able to educate the public, our constituents, our various countries, our various states, as to why there is the need for us to do development in an integrated manner. So I think this whole program was designed by the Indian government in 1978, fully launched in 1980. But even India itself was not able to implement it well. So China needs to send its experts to understudy the whole program. And China is now a well-developed class economy in the world. And because in the 80s, you see China to be a very big village. But now China is now a level player industry in the world. Now, coming back to the model, you realize that there is the need for us to be able to bridge the gap between the rich and poor. And if really we want to eradicate poverty in our shores, then the only way for us to do is to be able to develop our potentials. Now, you realize that there are so many potentials in our individual countries, but these potentials has never been utilized effectively and efficiently. Meaning that there are systems, there are mechanisms, there are products that are in Ghana that may be needed in Benin or maybe South Africa. But because we have blocks, we have obstacles, we have barriers to this trade. So at the end of the day, we are only experiencing post-harvest losses. So we are not encouraging our various countries to go into industrialization, to be able to go into high level of productivity, to be self-sufficient. So at the end of the day, our farmers have become peasant farming. We have limited them to the use of tools like the cutlass and the hoes, because the market is not there. When they produce, there is no available market. So we're trying to remove these barriers so that we'll be able to give credence to whatever our productivity level is. When you look at the way our various domestic currencies are performing in the global market, you realize that it's as a result of not able to have this continental free trade. Because you realize that even currently our CD may be performing quite weak against the international trading currency, simply because when you take the average productivity globally, we may be producing less. Our national productivity level may be less than the average global productivity level, and that may put some form of pressure on the domestic currency, thereby losing value. So what we are trying to do is that we develop a model, and the network tries to educate society, and we are educating various institutions, departments, ministries, and agencies, various universities, associations. And indeed, we are living in the global era, and only the shortest way is to make sure that information reach the people at a timely season, and that will really help to transform society. So I think that the network has come as a game changer and is really affecting lives. So if you see the way it has really transformed, and I think that the network has really prepared the grounds, and that may be another reason for which Ghana is now being chosen to host the Secretariat.
Let's stick with the whole issue of value that you talked about. In its recent publication, UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, it was indicated that the whole continental free trade area cannot happen without the discussion on rules of origin and value addition. For a lot of people, this is just economic geek talk. Help us understand why a free trade area cannot happen. We need to have this whole value addition, rules of origin. What is rules of origin? Now, and we'll start off with you, and then we'll go to...
Now, you realize that for every developed country, there can be no development without peace. So the first factor, you're looking at peace, and that supposed to be our backrock for sustainable development. So when you look at the SDGs, you also realize that it's really an agenda that UN has really propelled for growth and development. And for that matter, when you also look at the challenges associated with it, you realize that the core problem that African countries are going through is that we are not able to develop our raw materials into a secondary production. So we are not adding value to our raw materials. So we just extract it and export. And once that you do that, then your economy will surely be operating on an import-led economy, meaning that you always experience balance of payment deficit because your imports are more than your exports. And once that is done, meaning that your economy will not be resilient. And once your economy is not resilient, you cannot develop. The only way you can develop, as President even is championing, is going beyond aid. And going beyond aid means that you should champion industrialization. And industrialization also goes with productivity. And the productivity, you realize that needs to use raw materials, which also depends highly on the agri sector. So once the agri sector is weak, your economy is likely to scramble. Now you realize that when there is a discovery of oil, oil economy normally tries to subvert the will of agri sector because everybody wants to make quick money. But then the agri sector really carries, it really holds the breath of every economy. So what we are trying to do and what the network is trying to do is that we are educating society, educating various industry players that now, look, we need to call a spade and not a big spoon. It's time that there is a saying that a blow inevitably yours when earlier receive will extricate you from torrential hostilities, and we have no time to waste at all. What we must do now is that we must stop exporting our raw materials. We now need to draw programs and policies that the companies that are in US, UK, and all other places that are using our raw materials to manufacture or produce goods and commodities. Now we want them to come right here, set up the same companies here, produce one. When that is done, we have been able to solve the problem of unemployment. When that is done, we have been able to expand the economy. When that is done, we have been able to get more revenue. Once we receive more revenue, we have money for infrastructure development. When we do infrastructure development now, transportation becomes key because every production depends on transportation and energy. So you realize that we are championing the cost of energy. We need to be energy sufficient. So once that is done, you realize that we have really set the standard, the base for a divine takeoff.
And so, Reverend Molanyo, we're going to quickly unpack this thing that you talked about, transport. I'm going to revisit it in a moment. But I want to turn to you, Mr. Afo. So this whole exports, Reverend Molanyo Mensah talked about exports. Are exports the panacea for this value addition? Everyone now is talking about value addition. So you take your cocoa and then you add value to it. We've been doing it for many years and still making money. Why do we need to do anything extra to it? Why can't we just say AfCFTA is now in Ghana, the Secretariat, let's manage it like that and we'll still get our money? Why do we need to press on the value addition?
I think that you asked about the rules of origin. The rules of origin basically are rules when you go to any free trade area that you have to satisfy a condition of taking a product from one country to another. So it's like before country A, you are exporting to country B. You might meet the conditions that country B is expecting concerning that product. And it's all about tariff rules. And so it's, if the product that you are sending meets its requirement, then of course, then it also gets back to tell you, does it meet a certain standard of tariff akin to that product? Or if that product is refused entry into the country, why? So the rules of origin enables the kind of rules and laws that governs tariff concessions, tariff areas, and what have you. Now you talked about value additions. It's very important. It has been there, yes, it has been there, but you know, like Reverend Doctor said, African economies have always been raw. The world has gone beyond even secondary products to tertiary, to service. It has even gone beyond tertiary to service industries. The developed countries have finished even service industry and they don't know even what to do and have even come back to recessions. The problem is that I always keep on saying that even if you look at Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, where we are picking the value additions from, Ricardo's theory is obsolete. Why? Because Ricardo was looking at the theory at the time that capital was immobile. But now capital is mobile under globalization. And so people and economies are restructuring their bases well, such that if I can do within cocoa sector, what are the stages of additions that can be gained, which can form basis of stages of employment avenues, so that if I take cocoa as a product itself, and maybe I take about 5 people or 5 categories of chains. One can be the cocoa beans itself. The second can be a manufacturing base for producing cocoa powder, meal, or whatever. The next stage could be out of that. Some can also use it for medicinal purposes. Then another. That is the chains. That's the value addition chains. Okay. So at the end of the day, it creates at every value stage employment, at every value stage benefit, at every value stage something out of it. Now, one important thing that Doctor said about, and I just want to throw more light is that, you see, basically, you have to identify a product and a market. In order to really benefit from the continental free trade, you have to identify a product and its market. Africa used to export products to European Union and then US and what have you, but they were not getting a lot of value in return because it was not a finished product with serious value additions. And so what happened was that at the end of the day, they always have quotas restricting the type of the quantity that is supposed the quantity that's supposed to come to the market. Now with the continental free trade, you are not looking too far. You are doing intra-African trade.
Right now it's very low, 10, 11, 12%
yes.
or so.
So for example, if Ghana, West Africa here, you couldn't have exported school uniforms to maybe Europe. In Ghana, now with the continental free trade coming, to boost export, you can identify Nigerian market and say that, look, I want to export uniforms. Look at the market, about 200 million people. And so you couldn't have taken it to Europe. But under the free movement of goods and services, if it meets the criteria, the rules of origin, and you're able to export it freely under that category, immediately your export base is enlarged, and you create job for people. Then again, you can look at, let's go to a country like Ethiopia. They like the market of aluminium, utensils. It is so much here. You identify the product, you identify the market. You look at something like Seychelles, which depends so much on Brazil for butter. And you say, look, I want to manufacture butter to Seychelles. You quickly, it creates a startup for you. And so the export we are talking about is to conserve the foreign exchange that Dr. Walanya was talking about, so that it will not come from outside, but there will be intra-African trade. So for example, if you were able to export 20% to European market, and your cost of exportation, the rate of export was too high. Now with the African Continental Free Trade protocols, it will conserve that 80% within Africa, and your cost of export rate becomes a bit lower. So therefore, it means that it enables you to have such kind of revenues.
Okay, so we're going to quickly take a break, and we'll be right back.
4 years ago, like most young people, I was clueless as to what I wanted to do and which institution would help me realize a great career. What better place to pursue this dream than Blue Crest College? With state-of-the-art lecture halls and experienced lecturers, as well as equipped computer labs, Blue Crest is indeed the right starting point. With certificate, diploma and degree programs in information technology, business administration, journalism, oil and gas, Blue Crest is the one-stop institute for everyone who is looking to have a great career. Enroll now. Visit www.bluecrest.edu.gh or call any of the numbers on the screen. Blue Crest College. Education for life.
Welcome back from the break. Thank you once again. Let me just quickly remind you that the Association of African Universities is on YouTube. You can also find them on Facebook, and we'll be communicating the Twitter handles very shortly. But just back to our guests, Reverend Walanya Mensah and Mr. Louis Afo. Just want you to quickly land on the point that you were making about Seychelles and butter. Seychelles and butter.
Seychelles depends on Brazil for butter. They are on an island. I'm saying that it is imperative upon, if Ghana want to benefit, or any other African country, you identify the product first and the market, so that will boost your intra-African exports. And I'm saying that when the export of 80% cost rates is here, it helps you to conserve your revenue.
Okay. Here on the continent,
previously when you were spending your revenue compare against your cost, because the cost of export rates going outside Africa is so high that you get little even out of it. And I'm saying that with the intra-African trade, you get the product for the right market, and then you increase your volume to 80%, and then your cost of export rate becomes low, and then you conserve, because then you'll be able to have more revenue for employment. So I'm saying that it is up to member states to be able to identify what product I'm selling where, including IT, startups, the kind of Silicon Valleys that we have can be here. I know right now a lot of the youth coming out with strong apps for various solutions, not hardwares, even apps that can solve societal problems and what have you. These are areas that we need. And then finally, you realize that we are talking about, but we are not talking about commodity goods alone. We are talking about skills. So under Continental Free Trade, because we say freedom of people, movement of people. So we are saying that if you are in Ghana, for example, Mauritius is about 85% service industry. And I'm saying that if you finish your profession, you're in banking, and you realize that maybe the job market here is choked, you can move to societies under the protocol of free movement of people and go and work there. So you export your skills.
Viewers, I hope you have been listening very carefully to the discussions that we've been having. Right now, you don't have to, Ghana is no longer your home. Africa is no longer an island unto itself. You can move across the continent freely. Already we have it with ECOWAS. Visa-free in ECOWAS, visa-free in East Africa. The other regions are struggling a bit, but we'll get there. The Freedom of Movement Protocol is an important discussion that we definitely need to have. Let me just quickly remind you that you can drop your comments on the Association of African University TV. You can find it on YouTube. You can also find it on Facebook. You can also do a quick search of it on Twitter. I will give you the specific handles for Twitter very shortly. But just to let you know that there's a lot of hope along the horizon, and so just let us know the kind of thoughts, the fears, the issues that you think we may need to address along the Continental Free Trade Area. But let me just quickly get back to you, Reverend Wodani Mensah. All these nice things that you're talking about, it's very nice. It's great discussions, economic theories, value addition, and so on. But couldn't this just simply have been addressed by bringing together some experts to have a conversation? And why does Ghana even feature in it at all? Why do we need the whole secretariat located in a country like Ghana to ensure that these things can happen? Why don't we just bring experts together and say this is what we need to do?
Thank you very much. I think even the bears even have a resting place. So administratively, it's laudable that once you have a vision, you should be able to have a station as to when everybody wants to find out an information, should be able to get such data or information from a particular point. Now, notwithstanding that, you realize that the Continental Free Trade is not only selling our goods, but it equally promoting FDI, foreign direct investments. Yes. So what we are trying to do is to encourage our entrepreneurs, our businessmen and women who have the potentials and the capacity. Even various governments can equally help them to establish the subsidiary companies in the African sub-region. So if assuming that we have a company like maybe Coca-Cola that wanted to have a subsidiary in Togo or in Benin, in Nigeria, we are also ready to encourage. So the Secretariat is going to serve and is really going to service everybody's concern. So what we are also looking at is that once we are able to encourage foreign direct investment, it's really going to solve the problem of unemployment. Okay. Because what we have seen is that because much of the youths are unemployed, we have allowed them to engage in other criminal activities. Some have joined Boko Haram and all others. Most at times just because the jobs are not there. So they just want to find an ends meet. So what we are trying to do is that we need to solve the problems bottom-up approach. Yes. We really want to take power, authority, development from our various governments, our political leaders, down to business leaders. And that is the only way that the continent can really develop.
Our time is almost up, and I'm going to hold you on the whole idea of the business and private sector, which would be the
engine
topic
of
for,
growth, yes.
for the next, for the continuation of this in the next edition, the whole idea of the business and private sector. So I just wanted to hold you to that so that viewers would expect to see you again in the next edition.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
So you realize that the private sector is the engine of growth, and once that the private sector fails to function, the whole governance fails to function. So what we need to do now is to encourage individuals who are entrepreneurs, who have the zeal, who have the ambition, who have the vision, who have the foresight to go into high level of productivity, production, and that of manufacturing. So we are equally encouraging, and already the Secretariat has not fully started operation, but the kind of services the network is providing may be equal to the same services that the Secretariat may fully render when it's fully implemented. So what we are trying to do is that those who have very big businesses, companies and others, this is the time, this is the opportunity for us. We should really put our houses in order because we are about to take action.
And so in wrapping up, let me just quickly say that, and I'll turn to you, Mr. Afo, and then I'll come to you, that there was some information going around from the Economist Intelligence Unit that it is unlikely that the Continental Free Trade Area will be launched July 2020 because of the usual things that are happening on the continent, peace issues and so on and so forth. What's your take on that, so that we can use that to launch the next discussion?
I mean, that is an assertion, but that might not necessarily be true, because it's like a normal stock exchange. What do you need to open a stock exchange? When the members are present, or the traders or the brokers are inside the chamber or inside the trading hall, and the bell is rang, you start the stock exchange. In the same way, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, member states have ratified already. Okay, and we needed a certain number. We have 28 needed to ratify. If ratify, all we need to do is the host country, the president, will inaugurate the building and say that this has now been inaugurated. It becomes an independent body of the African Union, and therefore, what happens again? Ceremony is done and trading starts. There will be hitches along the line, but this is not where it's like going from a physical market to another physical market. No, you have representatives. If you have compliance issues, the Secretariat is functioning. They have their staff filled already, and you can make a compliance issues. Just as trading has been going on already on the borders, the only difference is that at the end of the day, the rules of origin would take time for people to acquaint themselves with it, because like I said earlier, you have about 500 pages of rules of origins that are going to be given to customs of various member states. Okay. So it's not going to be, it will surely be open for trade.
And equally, some people are speculating that we will not be able to meet the convergent criteria. And various political leaders may not have the political will to execute or to support. But that is an old Michael Jackson tune. And we are ever ready for action.
All right. So it looks like, according to the words of the network, we are poised for action to deliver intra-African trade, to move it from 10, 11, 12% to 52, 53, 54% that the UN Economic Commission Africa has been projecting in studies. And so clearly the whole conversation on the Continental Free Trade Area is timely. It's very important. We are just entering February. The Secretariat is going to be opening in March. And so the time for discussion is even too late. But it's always better late than never. So we're very happy to have had our two guests in the studio from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Policy Network. Gentlemen, thank you for making time out of your busy schedules to speak with us. And we are very confident that you'll be here next time, where we'll be focusing on a lot more specific areas, like the freedom of movement protocol, the private sector, which will be a lot of interest, attract a lot of interest to people who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to start their own business without always relying on government. I think those are areas where people will be keen to learn more about. So thank you once again for gracing this beautiful day with your presence. And we hope to speak to you again next time. Please remember to drop your comments on the YouTube channel, Association of African Universities TV, and also the Facebook. A quick search, you'll find it, and on Twitter as well. My name is Emmanuel K. Bensah Jr. I'm your host for this AfCFTA series. I hope to see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.